Good morning, you're watching Daybreak with me, Nadia Jani.
And me, Lou Brown, and we're ready to wake you up with all you need to know about the news across the world and in the region.
Here are your top stories.
Turkish military plane crashes in Georgia with at least 20 on board.
Venezuela mobilizes its military in response to US naval buildup in the Caribbean.
And Putin and Kazakhstan's Tokayev meet in Moscow.
First this morning, we continue our in-depth coverage of the Turkish military plane that crashed yesterday near the Azerbaijan-Georgia border. As more details have emerged, A News has obtained exclusive information confirming that all personnel on board the Turkish Air Force C-130 cargo plane were killed when it went down near the Georgian town of Siganahi.
The aircraft had been travelling from Azerbaijan to Turkey when it disappeared from radar without issuing a distress signal. Images from the scene show emergency services working among the wreckage, including what appears to be part of the plane's door. Here's more.
A News has obtained exclusive details on the Turkish Air Force C-130 crash in Georgia near the Azerbaijan border that killed all on board. The aircraft had departed from Ganja International Airport in western Azerbaijan before disappearing from radar and going down in the mountainous Signagi region. Exclusive information obtained by A News indicates the plane spent around 2 hours at Ganja Airport for maintenance and pre-flight checks. No third parties were allowed access, and all safety protocols were reportedly observed. The aircraft was transporting personnel responsible for servicing F-16 jets that participated in Baku's Victory Day parade on the 8th of November, along with mechanical spare parts. A Newsy sources confirm there were no explosives on board and no signs of external interference or detonation. Video footage of the crash shows the aircraft falling intact with no visible explosion. Investigators are considering two main causes. The first is the aircraft's age, over 50 years in service, with the last major overhaul in 2020, raising the possibility of structural failure from metal fatigue or corrosion, similar to the 2017 crash of a US Marine Corps KC-130, which disintegrated in mid-air due to a ruptured propeller blade. The second possibility involves cargo loading, as improperly secured equipment can shift in flight, affecting balance and stressing the fuselage. The aircraft's black box was recovered from open terrain and will be decoded, with results to be made public. Turkish, Georgian and Azerbaijani authorities are cooperating closely to determine the exact cause. The C-130 Hercules remains a long-serving tactical transport aircraft widely used by the Turkish Air Force. Preliminary findings point to technical or mechanical failure with no evidence of explosion or sabotage. Final conclusions are expected after flight recorder analysis and the joint investigation report is released.
And as rescue operations continue near the Siganahi region, officials from Turkey, Azerbaijan and Georgia remain in close contact, coordinating efforts and expressing solidarity in the wake of the crash that claimed multiple lives.
A Turkish military C-130 cargo plane has crashed near the Azerbaijan-Georgia border, Turkish authorities say. The aircraft with 20 personnel on board had taken off from Azerbaijan heading back to Turkey. Video footage reportedly shows the plane spiraling as it descended, leaving a trail of white smoke. The Georgian Interior Ministry confirmed the crash occurred in the Signagi municipality, around 5 kilometers from the border. According to the Georgian Air Navigation Service, a few minutes after entering Georgian airspace, the Turkish C-130 aircraft disappeared from radar without sending a distress signal. Search and rescue operations are underway in coordination with Azerbaijani and Georgian authorities. According to Foreign Ministry sources, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan also held a phone call with his Georgian counterpart Maka Bochorishvili to discuss ongoing search and rescue efforts. Bochorishvili conveyed her condolences over the crash. Turkey's Interior Minister Ali Yerlikaya said he spoke by phone with Georgia's Interior Minister Gela Geladze. An investigation is underway under Georgia's criminal code covering aviation safety violations resulting in loss of life. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has expressed deep sorrow the incident.
Today, we learnt with deep sorrow that our C-130 military aircraft, which was on its way to our country from Azerbaijan, crashed on the Georgia-Azerbaijan border. Our efforts to reach the wreckage are continuing in coordination with the local authorities. God willing, we will overcome this accident with the least possible loss. May our Lord have mercy on our martyrs. Let us, with our prayers, be by their side, God willing.
Koordineli biçimde çalışmalarımız devam ediyor.
Azerbaijan also expressed condolences, sharing in Turkey's grief. In a message to President Erdogan, Azerbaijan extended heartfelt sympathies to the families of the deceased, the people of Turkey, and the Turkish government. Prime Minister Ali Asadov, in a conversation with his Georgian counterpart, affirmed that Azerbaijan is ready to provide all necessary assistance, including dispatching search and rescue teams and relevant personnel from the Ministry of Emergency Situations to the site. Turkish Vice President Cevdet Yılmaz also spoke by phone with Azerbaijani Prime Minister Ali Asadov about the situation. Yılmaz said Asadov conveyed Azerbaijan's condolences and solidarity, stressing that the country is closely following developments.
Now we're going to head to our correspondent, Nini Nikoleshvili, who's reporting from location.
We are reporting from the nearest accessible point to the crash site in Georgia's Sirnari municipality. We are at Turkish military transport aircraft. A C-130 Hercules has tragically gone down near the Georgian-Azerbaijan border. All 20 people on board have been confirmed dead. Flight tracking data from Flightradar shows the aircraft departed from Ganja airport in Azerbaijan at 14:19 local time, after which it disappeared from international monitoring platforms. The plane had been flying at approximately 8 kilometers in altitude and a speed of 519 kilometers per hour before the crash. Eyewitnesses, including locals, hunters, and farmers, have discovered scattered debris across the rugged mountainous terrain, indicating the scale of the disaster. The aircraft vanished from Georgian radar just minutes after entering national airspace without sending an emergency signal. Georgia's Air Navigation Service immediately launched search and rescue operations. Helicopters are currently deployed over the steep crash zone, several kilometers from Holagiri Monastery, as emergency and security teams work to recover wreckage. Georgia's Interior Ministry, Gela Geladze, along with First Deputy Roni Mesri, is on site coordinating rescue and investigation efforts. Authorities have expressed condolences to the victims' families and the people of Turkey, noting close governmental coordination during this tragic event. Turkey's Ministry of Defense has confirmed the number and identities of those deceased. Georgia's Ministry of Internal Affairs has opened a criminal investigation under Article 275, Part 4, concerning violations of aviation safety regulations, resulting in fatalities. Further updates will follow once recovery and investigation operations are completed. High-level coordination continues with Azerbaijan and Turkey, offering support including emergency personnel and technical assistance, while Georgian agencies remain fully mobilized. Rescue teams are operating under extremely challenging conditions, navigating steep terrain, scattered wreckage, and limited visibilities. Authorities caution that full site access and recovery operations may take several hours. Nini Nikoleshvili, Sirnari, A News.
Now let's turn to the Turkish C-130E Hercules cargo plane. It's one of the world's most widely operated military transport aircraft, known for its durability across combat, disaster relief and logistic missions. Here's a closer look at its capabilities and recent developments.
The C-130E Hercules, a 4-engine turboprop tactical airlifter, has been a cornerstone of US and Allied military operations for decades. Originally designed to operate from unpaved airstrips, the versatile aircraft has flown on every continent, landed on aircraft carriers, and supported missions ranging from combat airlifts to humanitarian relief. First flown in August 1954, the C-130E entered service with the US Air Force in 1962 and played key roles in the Vietnam War, as well as conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq. It has also been instrumental in humanitarian missions, Antarctic resupply, firefighting, and disaster relief worldwide. The Hercules has a wingspan of 40.41 meters, a length of 29.79 meters, and a height of 11.66 meters. Capable of carrying up to 20,400 kilograms of cargo, including troops, vehicles, or medical evacuees, the C-130E has a range of approximately 3,800 kilometers, a service ceiling of about 10,060 meters, and a maximum speed of around 589 kilometers per hour. Its adaptability extends to specialized versions such as the AC-130 gunship for close air support. Several countries still operate the C-130E Hercules, including Turkey, Poland, and the United States Air Force. Recent C-130 incidents include a Thai Air Force aircraft hitting a pole in Koh Samui in May 2025, and a Hellenic Air Force C-130H striking a pole at Kefalonia Airport, Greece in July 2024.
We're now going to take a look at the stories shaping the day across the globe. And first we kick things off with our website A News, and still on that leading story of yesterday's plane crash. Now, A News exclusive, investigators probe. There are two reasons given for this crash. One, potentially structural failure due to metal fatigue or corrosion. We know the plane itself was over 50 years old and last underwent major overhaul over 5 years ago. Or it could be an improperly secured cargo that may have shifted mid-flight, causing instability and possible fuselage failure. So still under investigation, but quite a devastating accident in Georgia last night.
Exactly, and then also not only is this leading on A News website, it's also leading on BBC News website. Now the information is coming out more and more throughout the day, but it's saying that the black box has been recovered and will be sent for decoding. So just to try to get more analysis as to what happened and why it happened in that particular way. Obviously, we know there were fatalities, and condolences have been sent to the families about that and the wreckage that was found near that Georgian cross-Azerbaijan border as well. And I think we're just finding out more and more information about how this particular cargo plane decided to obviously crash. We know that it wasn't a very young plane. I think it was you mentioned, Lou, before that it was around about 50 plus years. So we're just trying to get more and more detail into what happened and those who have passed, unfortunately, due to that.
Yeah, let's have a look at the BBC's story on the plane crash as well. So obviously making global headlines, not just a regional story here. The Turkish military plane, we might add, the plane sent no emergency signal after it departed Ganja Airport at 2:20 local time. It just continued on its path and then suddenly went off radar until it crashed. It's quite a difficult place for rescuers to restore and investigate, as the debris is quite scattered in mountainous terrain and the weather is quite unpredictable in that region at the bottom of the Caucasus Mountains as well. So Georgia's Interior Ministry has opened a criminal case, actually Article 275 Part 4, for aviation safety violation, resulting in these fatalities.
Ravi, let's go to the next story, which is Le Monde, I believe. Right, so this is the next story. So French President Emmanuel Macron has said that they want to provide more ways into making sure that there is a clear crossover for Israel annexation in the West Bank, which they say will cross red lines, but they want to create a Palestinian formation in regards to where they are recognized as its own state. And they want to provide that type of way into that to make sure that it's peaceful, and a draft of a provisional constitution is made and all agreed by the parties involved. involved. So that is leading on Le Monde at the moment. And Macron's comments come after France officially recognised the Palestinian state in September and everything that's going on in that.
Yes, quite a prudent story indeed, given the latest on Israel-Gaza conflict as well, and that ceasefire. Now we know with regards to the West Bank, there have also been some issues, but I think we've just flicked over to CNN here. So Nadia, you rounded that up very well indeed. So let's go on to our next story, CNN. Let's go to the top of the page so the viewers can see what we're looking at. We know this is in relation to the terror attack that happened in Pakistan, in Islamabad yesterday. Let's just have a look at what CNN have described. At least 12 killed in Islamabad, suicide attack, the most deadly assault in the Pakistani capital since 2008. Now, we know that Pakistan have blamed India, and India is now saying that we have nothing to do with this. So again, sparking some cross-border tensions that we've seen earlier in the year as well.
Exactly. And just on that, the last major suicide bombing in Islamabad was actually in 2008 at the Marriott Hotel, which killed 54 people. So we are watching this particular story quite intensely, also because video footage showed smoke and flames rising from a car near the city's High Court. So there are a number of things going on. And as you mentioned, there have been clashes between these two nations previously before, and peace talks in Istanbul unfortunately failed due to the ceasefire on the borders, but it's something that is currently going on as we speak. So we just hope that we find out more information as the day continues.
Yes, and that's our press roundup. We're going to take a short break, but when we return, we'll discuss the rest of the global stories. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Daybreak. You're watching A News, but before we go on, I've noticed something. Lou, you're missing something.
My mug, yeah.
You had one job. One job.
For all those viewers who can't see behind the scenes, I'm currently getting an earful from my director for mistakenly placing my mug upstairs.
But we digress. So let's take a look at the global stories. The United States is on the brink of ending its longest ever government shutdown. On Monday night, the Senate passed a bipartisan funding bill to reopen federal operations and fund them through to the end of January. However, federal workers are still struggling from the impact of the closure.
The 42-day US federal government shutdown has left thousands of federal employees without pay and forced many to seek help from local charities. In Hyattsville, Maryland, workers lined up at community food banks on Tuesday, collecting bread, poultry, cookies, and fresh produce.
Financially, I don't have an emergency fund where it should be. So in that regard, not prepared enough. Emotionally, I was getting myself prepared for that because I knew I had a strong feeling, an indication that we were going to extend the previous shutdown, and we've already been through this multiple times.
For the White House to say that we are being overpaid, that we're being overpaid for nothing, that's definitely an insult, and that affects me personally. I've been living in my car as a federal worker for 3 years here in the DC area. At least having food security is one of the main lifelines that I have and that I can still count on. From the wonderful generosities of the charities here in the capital area.
House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries addressed reporters in Washington, criticizing Republican policies on health care, urging lawmakers to, quote, cancel the cuts, lower the costs, save health care.
House Democrats, led by myself and Whip Catherine Clark, will give the Republicans another opportunity to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits by introducing an amendment that will extend these tax credits for a 3-year period of time. Same period of time that these tax credits were extended back in 2022. Republicans have created a health care crisis all across America.
The Senate on Monday voted to advance a funding bill that would end the shutdown and fully fund SNAP benefits, with the House expected to take it as soon as Wednesday. If approved, the government could fully reopen within days, allowing federal workers to receive their first paychecks in more than a month. Officials warn that it may take several days for services such as air travel to return to normal.
Now, Venezuela is strengthening its national defense amid rising tensions with the United States. President Nicolas Maduro has signed a new law creating integral defense commands to unify civilian and military forces across the country. This move comes alongside nationwide military exercises, signaling Venezuela's readiness to defend its sovereignty.
Queremos paz, tendremos.
Venezuela is immediately activating its so-called integral defense commands designed to unify civilian and military forces across the country. It's after President Nicolas Maduro signed a new national defense law on Tuesday. Maduro said the law establishes a network of state and military bodies to respond to threats.
Todos los comandos de defensa integral.
By signing, the order must be activated for the integral defense commands to be established, structured, and put to work to be prepared. If we, as a republic, as a people, must go to armed struggle to defend this sacred heritage of the liberators, we must be ready to win, to triumph through the path of patriotism and courage. So I proceed to sign and execute the law for the creation of National Integral Defense Commands, signed, approved and ratified today, Tuesday, November 11th, 2025.
De los comandos de defensa integral a nivel nacional. Firmada, aprobada.
The law, approved by Venezuela's National Assembly in an historic vote, received support from both the President and Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino Lopez. Assembly President Jorge Rodriguez said it would reshape the country's military doctrine.
The honourable deputies who are in favour of approving the second discussion of the bill for the Integral Defence Command of the nation, in accordance with the provisions of Article 106 of the Internal Rules and Debate, please manifest it with the customary signal. Consequently, it is approved with a qualified majority.
On the same day, Venezuela's Bolivarian Armed Forces launched a nationwide military exercise, Plan Independencia 200, testing the real-time deployment of weapons and forces. The moves come amid ongoing tensions with the United States, which has carried out multiple strikes on vessels near the Venezuelan coast and in the eastern Pacific since September, killing dozens of people. The US claims the boats were transporting drugs, though critics have demanded evidence. Maduro has accused Donald Trump of seeking to topple his government, a claim the US president has downplayed.
France has announced new steps to support the creation of a future Palestinian state. President Emmanuel Macron said Paris will help the Palestinian Authority draft a constitution and will contribute €100 million in humanitarian aid to Gaza next year. The move follows France's recognition of a Palestinian state in September and reflects growing frustration with Israel's stance on peace talks.
Vous pouvez, Monsieur le Président, compter sur la France.
Mr. President, you can count on France to continue moving forward along the path we have forged together, to continue advancing according to the 20-point plan proposed by the United States, which paves the way for peace and the establishment of a Palestinian state. It is for this purpose that we have today jointly decided to establish a joint committee for the consolidation of the State of Palestine. This committee will be responsible for working on all legal aspects, constitutional, institutional, and organizational. It will contribute to the work of developing a new constitution, a draft of which President Abbas has presented to me, and will aim to finalize all the conditions for such a state of Palestine.
Staying on Gaza's peace plan, the US military is exploring the possibility of building a temporary base near the Gaza Strip capable of housing 10,000 personnel. The move is part of plans for an international stabilization force to monitor the fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hamas signed last month. A Navy request for information sent to contractors outlines a self-sustaining base, including office space, meals, medical facilities, power, water, and full security for a year. Israel's military says it is coordinating with the US, but has no concrete details yet. The request for contractors mirrors a previous $1.26 billion project to build a 5,000-bed tent camp at an army base in Texas.
Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand welcomed the group of 7 foreign ministers to the Niagara-on-the-Lake on Tuesday, where they posed for a traditional family photo before beginning talks. Ministers from Ukraine, Brazil, India and several other countries were also invited to this week's meetings. The G7 agenda is expected to be dominated by Ukraine, Sudan and the Middle East as US President Donald Trump's latest peace efforts continue to face challenges in Ukraine. Ahead of the discussions, Anand said she expected focused conversations with the partners about the long path forward to peace in both regions.
Now, Russia claims its troops have pushed further into key eastern Ukrainian cities as heavy fighting continues across the Donbass. Ukraine says the situation on several fronts has become increasingly difficult.
Moscow says its forces have advanced deeper into the city of Pokrovsk, known to Russians as Krasnoarmeysk, describing it as a crucial gateway to the rest of the Donetsk region. Russian soldiers have been seen riding into the Ukrainian city on motorbikes and battered vehicles, moving through fog and debris-strewn roads. Ukraine's military reports around 300 Russian soldiers are already inside Pokrovsk, with fierce street battles underway. Experts say that capturing Pokrovsk would give Russia a stronger position to push north towards Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, 2 of Ukraine's last major strongholds in Donetsk. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has called the situation difficult, while his top commander, Oleksandr Syrsky, says conditions in southeast parts of Zaporizhzhia have also significantly worsened. Moscow, meanwhile, claims to control more than 19% of Ukraine's territory, its largest hold since the war began nearly 3 years ago. Neither side's battlefield claims can be independently verified. But with Russia intensifying attacks in both Donetsk and Zaporizhzhia, the fighting shows no sign of easing.
We're now going to take a break. When we return, we'll discuss the key regional headlines with an in-guest studio to help us unpack more. You don't want to miss it. Welcome back. Now let's take you through the news of what is happening across the region. First, Armenia's Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has stirred fresh controversy over the legacy of the Karabakh conflict, accusing former leaders of using it as a political leash to weaken Armenia's statehood. But his predecessors are pushing back, saying it was Pashinyan himself who provoked tensions with his bold declaration that Karabakh is Armenia, full stop.
That statement, they argue, invited a sharp response from Baku and helped pave the way for the 2020 war. So, is Pashinyan right that the problem lies in the past, or did his own words add fuel to the fire? Well, joining us now is Vasif Husainov, Head of Department at the Center for Analysis of International Relations. Vasif, thank you very much for coming in. And you've got a mug. I don't even have my mug today. I've forgotten it. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And good morning. Do you think Prime Minister Pashinyan will really go ahead and publish those Karabakh papers? And if he does, what kind of information do we expect to come out?
You know, as next year's parliamentary elections in Armenia approaching, we are seeing increasingly more confrontational political environment in Armenia. Both sides, opposition and ruling party, accusing each other of different failures. And one major topic is, of course, Armenia's defeat in the Second Karabakh War. Our opposition, members of opposition, are accusing Prime Minister Pashinyan and his government of mishandling situation prior to the Second Karabakh War, during the Second Karabakh War, and even after the Second Karabakh War. And in response, Pashinyan is trying to open all his cards to show that the defeat in the war was actually the mistake of previous governments. And one major argument he is using, and he has been using since the end of Second Karabakh War, was that the former governments had actually recognized Azerbaijan's territorial integrity, with Karabakh part of it. And during the entire period since the end of Second Karabakh War, Prime Minister Pashinyan has publicized several documents showing that in 1990s, the former governments of Armenia sidelined the representatives of Karabakh separatist regime from the peace talks with Azerbaijan, and later on, during the peace negotiations mediated by Minsk group of the OSCE, Armenia de facto recognized Azerbaijan's territorial integrity, with Karabakh part of it. So,
but
I expect that
these papers in
these
particular.
papers. I expect that these papers will be about all this process, negotiations, and I don't expect something new to come out of it. Most likely, it will be another argument showing that indeed the former governments of Armenia recognize Azerbaijan's territorial integrity. They sidelined the representatives of Karabakh separatist regime from the peace talks. And nothing new. I don't expect something extraordinary would come out of it and would save Pashinyan from all this criticism of opposition parties.
Well, in your article for commonspace.eu, you mentioned that the trip corridor could become a stage for geopolitical contention. But if it isn't kept economic and inexclusive, could you explain what you meant by that? Because we kind of want to get the understanding of what that particularly means, and how serious is the risk that this particular project could turn into another political battleground instead of a path to cooperation?
You know, Trip Corridor is a brilliant chance for peace and security, lasting peace and security in the South Caucasus. And it has been possible after 5 years of negotiations, very intense negotiations, and eventually, thanks to the efforts of the Trump administration, it was possible to come to agreement on the Zengezur Corridor, which was rebranded to Trump Route for International Peace and Security. But we still see some people in the Western countries, as well as in the region and surrounding countries, that they try to use it as a matter of confrontation to provoke some hostilities in the South Caucasus. We saw this during Biden administration, for example, whose representatives were saying that they want to use Zengezur Corridor in order to reduce dependence of Central Asian states on Russia and China. It was a call for war. It was a call for political hostilities or military escalation in the South Caucasus. But fortunately, their intentions, their plans failed, and now we have a new chance, a real chance, a unique chance for peace and security and cooperation, prosperity in the South Caucasus. But we still see these people, both in the Western countries, in the United States, in the US, as well as in the surrounding countries, who are discontent, dissatisfied with the results of Washington summit of August 8th. And some people present the Trump Corridor, Zengezur Corridor, as a geopolitical gamble of the United States or EU against Russia and China, while in the regional countries we see the perceptions about Zengezur Corridor as a matter of confrontation. And my article was particularly focused on this matter, saying that we should overcome all these intentions and to use the Trump Corridor as a means for peace, prosperity, cooperation in the South Caucasus, not as a tool for confrontations, hostilities.
Yeah.
Well, this is a US-backed corridor, as we know. How can that not upset Moscow? Pashinyan himself said that this is a good thing for Russia. Is that true? And if so, what do we expect from Russia to do?
You know, actually, President Aliyev also talked about the potential of the Trump Corridor to contribute to economic development, not only of Armenia and Azerbaijan, but also surrounding countries. Trump Corridor has the potential to be used also for north-south transportation. And it has already happened. Russia started to export grains through Azerbaijan. to Armenia. And in the future, the Zengezur corridor, tram corridor will be used for this communication as well. So indeed, this corridor, this project has the potential to contribute not only to Armenia's and Azerbaijan's economies, but also to Iran's and Russia's economies. But as I said in response to the previous question, there are political circles in the surrounding countries, in Russia, in Iran as well. They still view this process through the lens of geopolitical confrontation against the background of all this happening between Russia and the West. And these political circles view it as a defeat of Russia vis-à-vis the United States, vis-à-vis the European Union. And that's the reason why they don't want to accept the potential for economic prosperity, cooperation, transportation offered by the Zengezur corridor. Rejecting all these opportunities, they focus on the negative sides, on geopolitical aspects, confrontation, hostilities, and etc.
And Mr. Vassif, I just want to quickly ask you a question because we're very tight on time. But how would you say Pashinyan's accusations against the former president, especially in his claim that it was being used as a leash, so other forces used Karabakh as a leash, does that resonate with Armenian voters today?
You know, our observations demonstrate that the Armenian public is mostly against the war hostilities between Armenia and Azerbaijan. There is a war fatigue in the Armenian public, and we see that the calls of the opposition parties for some demonstrations against the peace process, against the peace treaty, are not welcomed by the Armenian society by large. A very few insignificant number of people are attending these demonstrations against the Armenian government, against the peace treaty process with Azerbaijan. So we can assume that what is offered by the opposition is sort of a call for the past, for former confrontations, hostilities, and not so supported by the Armenian society.
I see. Well, thank you so much for your insights and joining us. It's been very great. Right, over to Moscow now, where Russian President Vladimir Putin met with Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev at the Kremlin on Tuesday. It's part of Tokayev's two-day official visit to Russia. According to the Kremlin, the leaders discussed gas projects and the effects of US sanctions on Russian oil companies, including Lukoil and Rosneft, which have major stakes in Kazakhstan. It's reported that Putin was also interested in hearing about Tokayev's recent talks in Washington. The meeting is ahead of a summit on Wednesday where the two leaders are expected to sign bilateral documents and address the Russia-Kazakhstan Interregional Cooperation Forum.
Over to Egypt, where the country has wrapped up the first phase of its parliamentary elections, covering 14 of the 27 provinces. Voting was held on Monday and Tuesday, with officials reporting a high turnout. More than 1,200 candidates are competing in this stage, with results expected on the 18th of November. Polling is being held in several phases over a period of more than 5 weeks. The second phase takes place later this month, with final results due on the 2nd of December. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, elected to a third term nearly 2 years ago, continues to enjoy strong support from most parties.
Those were your regional stories. We'll be back after this short break, where we'll be joined by Ross Feingold, political risk analyst, joining us from Taipei.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Welcome back to Daybreak. It's just before 15 minutes to 10 a.m. and we're now going to dive into exploring our global story in greater detail. Spain's King Felipe VI arrived in China for a 4-day state visit, his first official trip to the country and the first by a Spanish monarch in 18 years. The visit aims to deepen political and economic ties with a strong focus on electric vehicles, renewable energy and technology cooperation. Manon Makdoum reports from Beijing.
Spain's King Felipe VI is in China for a 4-day state visit. It's his first visit to the country and the first visit by a Spanish monarch in 18 years. The visit aims to deepen economic and political relations between the two countries with a strong focus on investment in electric vehicles, renewable energy and technology cooperation. The King's itinerary includes stops in Chengdu and Beijing, where he's accompanied by senior Spanish officials and business leaders seeking to secure new trade and investment opportunities in green industries and advanced manufacturing. China is currently Spain's largest trading partner outside the EU, and Madrid hopes that the royal visit will help further enhance trade relations by promoting Spanish exports such as food, wine, and industrial goods, while attracting Chinese investment for Spain's fast-growing EV and energy sectors. The trip also symbolizes Spain's pragmatic approach to China by engaging economically while maintaining alignment with the EU and Western policies. For China, welcoming the king reinforces its ties with a key EU member, seen as open to cooperation rather than confrontation, while for Spain, it offers an opportunity to present itself as a bridge between China and Europe in areas of sustainable growth and technology. Mario Maclean, A News, Beijing.
Well, we're lucky enough to discuss this in greater detail with Nadia being joined online with a guest.
Yes, I have a guest who is with me, political risk analyst Ross Feingold. Welcome to the program. And I'm just going to kick off directly with a question. So we just heard that this is the first time the Spanish monarch has visited China in 18 years. Why has it taken so long and why now?
Of course, in the middle of that period, there was COVID, so that disrupted international travel and these kinds of visits. But also, the relationship between the European Union and China has been in flux at many times over those past years. At times, it seemed like they were going to get closer, and at times, it seemed that the relationship has been contentious. Why is it contentious at times? A number of issues. One is the trade relationship. In many cases, EU countries have a trade deficit with China. And some countries, not necessarily Spain, but some countries in the EU, are very outspoken about human rights issues, issues including Xinjiang, Tibet, Hong Kong, Taiwan, the South China Sea. So there's any number of one of reasons why the relationship between the EU and China has at times become pretty bad, frankly, in recent years. Having said all that, at the moment, there's a mix. Some European countries are quite outspoken in their criticisms of China, their warnings about doing business with China. Countries that fall into that group include Lithuania and the Czech Republic. There are other countries that are critics at times, willing to engage with other parties that are critics of China, whether that's exiles from Hong Kong or with the Taiwan government. And then there are other countries at the moment where they frankly are prioritizing the business relationship with China. And I would put Spain into that group. We don't see Spain being a leader in vocalizing criticisms of China the way some other European governments have decided to do. So that's probably why the relationship is on a positive trajectory from the perspective of China and from the perspective of Spanish businesses. And that facilitates this visit.
I see. Well, Spain has said that it wants to cement business and align political interests. Do you think that's the right move to take, especially because of the close ties it has to the US, and the US sees China as a threat?
Certainly the United States under the Trump administration would prefer that European countries take a more cautious attitude towards China. That being said, obviously, when President Trump met with President Xi Jinping recently, just a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, I should say. In South Korea, the priority from President Trump was to be positive and to try and advance the bilateral trade agenda and to persuade China to do more business with the United States. So it's a little difficult for the United States to say to other countries, you can't do business with China. That being said, I think the United States will continue to warn European countries about things such as letting Huawei provide 5G equipment, which is a contentious issue with Spain at the moment. I think the US will continue to warn about industrial espionage, hacking, things like that. But a more direct answer to your question would be that again, the outside organizations that I mentioned earlier, activist groups that support human rights in Tibet or Xinjiang, people that are concerned about developments in Hong Kong, the Taiwan government and its supporters. Of course, they're not going to be thrilled that a major European country like Spain at the moment is seeking a better relationship with China.
Well, just off of that, how might this relationship that they're trying to seek and create stronger ties, what are the economic opportunities for both countries?
At the moment, China has a massive trade surplus with Spain. So China's pretty happy with the way things are as far as the bilateral trade relationship. But I think China recognizes that that's not sustainable. People in Spain are going to complain about that and say, hey, you got to buy more Spanish goods. And that's why part of the reason for this royal visit is really to sell more Spanish products to China and to attract more Chinese investment in Spain. Now that also makes Spain somewhat unique because a lot of countries in the European Union at the moment are simply not welcoming Chinese investment. There are exceptions. Hungary, for example, is a notable exception. But the goal here for the Spanish government, including the king, is to get China to spend more money on Spanish goods. And there's, as you mentioned in the in the report leading into our discussion, there's plenty of growth areas that Spain could pursue as far as persuading companies in China to buy more Spanish goods. So that's why they're there, frankly, to make money.
Yes, well, it's always money or political ties and interest. Would you say that Spain is also trying to diversify outside of EU markets, considering that China is one of its biggest and largest trade partners outside of the EU?
No surprise, in the current era where we have higher tariffs from the United States on goods from the European Union, even though the EU and the US have reached a trade deal, which should prevent the tariffs from being raised even higher, but those tariffs are higher than they were before President Trump came into office this year, imposed higher tariffs, which then resulted in a negotiated deal with the European Union. So certainly there's the potential for slowing sales to the United States from any country in the EU, including Spain, but it's just smart strategy to diversify one's markets, keeping in mind, of course, the distance. It's far, it's expensive to ship goods. They most often will go by sea freight, but China is an important market and Spain wants to be there, and that's what we see with this trip.
Definitely, and one of the other biggest exports to China from Spain is pork, being one of its very lucrative endeavors in that particular area. Would you say there are any other challenges in regards to their trade when looking at Spain and looking at China? And can we foresee anything in the future that might hinder trade negotiations?
Frankly, there's the political factors because we've seen China's willingness to cut off trade with countries that take actions which displease China. And those are often political actions. They're not trade actions that cause trade retaliation by China. So Lithuania is a good example. It allowed Taiwan to open a representative office using the name Taiwanese Representative Office, whereas in most places when Taiwan opens an office, it's called the Taipei Economic and Cultural Office, not the Taiwanese Representative Office. And that caused a friction between Lithuania and China, and China basically stopped buying Lithuanian goods for a while, even though that's been recovering slowly and without a lot of fanfare. Another example in this part of the world is Australia. where during COVID-19, the Australian Prime Minister at the time criticized China's response and China's lack of interest in participating in an international investigation into the origins of COVID, and that really damaged bilateral relationship. And China retaliated by really a broad cessation in the purchase of Australian goods, both energy products as well, natural resources, as well as agricultural products, and one of the more prominent ones was red wine. This was really devastating to growers in the agricultural sector in Australia, which had come to rely on the Chinese market. So for Spain, there's a significant risk. If you rely too much on China, but you get into some kind of disagreement politically, then China could cut off those purchases. So we're back to talking about the importance of diversification. But if they do come to rely heavily on China, there is that risk that the purchasing could be cut off overnight.
Well, thank you so much for joining me and for your insights today. Thank you, Mr. Feingold.
Thank you.
Well, that's a wrap of our global talk. We're going to take another short break. Don't go anywhere.
Has obtained exclusive details on the Turkish Air Force C-130 crash in Georgia near the Azerbaijan border that killed all on board. The aircraft had departed from Ganja International Airport in western Azerbaijan before disappearing from radar and going down in the mountainous Signagi region. Exclusive information obtained by A News indicates the plane spent around 2 hours at Ganja Airport for maintenance and pre-flight checks. No third parties were allowed access, and all safety protocols were reportedly observed. The aircraft was transporting personnel responsible for servicing F-16 jets that participated in Baku's Victory Day parade on the 8th of November, along with mechanical spare parts. A Newsy sources confirm there were no explosives on board and no signs of external interference or detonation. Video footage of the crash shows the aircraft falling intact with no visible explosion. Investigators are considering two main causes. The first is the aircraft's age, over 50 years in service, with the last major overhaul in 2020, raising the possibility of structural failure from metal fatigue or corrosion, similar to the 2017 crash of a US Marine Corps KC-130, which disintegrated in mid-air due to a ruptured propeller blade. The second possibility involves cargo loading, as improperly secured equipment can shift in flight, affecting balance and stressing the fuselage. The aircraft's black box was recovered from open terrain and will be decoded, with results to be made public. Turkish, Georgian and Azerbaijani authorities are cooperating closely to determine the exact cause. The C-130 Hercules remains a long-serving tactical transport aircraft widely used by the Turkish Air Force. Preliminary findings point to technical or mechanical failure with no evidence of explosion or sabotage. Final conclusions are expected after flight recorder analysis and the joint investigation report is released.
Well, hello and welcome to Prime Time. What a show we've got lined up for you. In a complex world, clarity is power. Live, diplomacy dissected in a spin-free environment. That's Prime Time with me, Guy Schoen, weekdays on A News.
Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak on A News with me, Nadia Jani and Lou Brown. Here are today's top stories. Turkish military plane crashes in Georgia with at least 20 on board.
Venezuela mobilizes its military in response to US naval buildup in the Caribbean.
And Putin and Kazakhstan's Tokayev meet in Moscow. First, we continue our in-depth coverage of the Turkish military plane that crashed yesterday near the Azerbaijan-Georgia border as more details have emerged. A News has obtained exclusive information confirming that all personnel on board the Turkish Air Force C-130 cargo plane were killed when it went down near the Georgian town of Siganehi. The aircraft had been traveling from Azerbaijan to Turkey when it disappeared from radar without issuing a distress signal. Images from the scene show emergency services working among the wreckage, including what appears to be part of the plane's door. Here's more.
A News has obtained exclusive details on the Turkish Air Force C-130 crash in Georgia near the Azerbaijan border that killed all on board. The aircraft had departed from Ganja International Airport in western Azerbaijan before disappearing from radar and going down in the mountainous Signagi region. Exclusive information obtained by A News indicates the plane spent around 2 hours at Ganja Airport for maintenance and pre-flight checks. No third parties were allowed access, and all safety protocols were reportedly observed. The aircraft was transporting personnel responsible for servicing F-16 jets that participated in Baku's Victory Day parade on the 8th of November, along with mechanical spare parts. A Newsy sources confirm there were no explosives on board and no signs of external interference or detonation. Video footage of the crash shows the aircraft falling intact with no visible explosion. Investigators are considering two main causes. The first is the aircraft's age, over 50 years in service, with the last major overhaul in 2020, raising the possibility of structural failure from metal fatigue or corrosion, similar to the 2017 crash of a US Marine Corps KC-130, which disintegrated in mid-air due to a ruptured propeller blade. The second possibility involves cargo loading, as improperly secured equipment can shift in flight, affecting balance and stressing the fuselage. The aircraft's black box was recovered from open terrain and will be decoded, with results to be made public. Turkish, Georgian and Azerbaijani authorities are cooperating closely to determine the exact cause. The C-130 Hercules remains a long-serving tactical transport aircraft widely used by the Turkish Air Force. Preliminary findings point to technical or mechanical failure with no evidence of explosion or sabotage. Final conclusions are expected after flight recorder analysis and the joint investigation report is released.
And as rescue operations continue near the Sigani region, officials from Turkey, Azerbaijan and Georgia remain in close contact, coordinating efforts and expressing solidarity in the wake of the crash that claimed multiple lives.
A Turkish military C-130 cargo plane has crashed near the Azerbaijan-Georgia border, Turkish authorities say. The aircraft with 20 personnel on board had taken off from Azerbaijan heading back to Turkey. Video footage reportedly shows the plane spiraling as it descended, leaving a trail of white smoke. The Georgian Interior Ministry confirmed the crash occurred in the Signagi municipality, around 5 kilometers from the border. According to the Georgian Air Navigation Service, a few minutes after entering Georgian airspace, the Turkish C-130 aircraft disappeared from radar without sending a distress signal. Search and rescue operations are underway in coordination with Azerbaijani and Georgian authorities. According to Foreign Ministry sources, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan also held a phone call with his Georgian counterpart Maka Bochorishvili to discuss ongoing search and rescue efforts. Bochorishvili conveyed her condolences over the crash. Turkey's Interior Minister Ali Yerlikaya said he spoke by phone with Georgia's Interior Minister Gela Geladze. An investigation is underway under Georgia's criminal code covering aviation safety violations resulting in loss of life. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has expressed deep sorrow at the incident.
Today, we learnt with deep sorrow that our C-130 military aircraft, which was on its way to our country from Azerbaijan, crashed on the Georgia-Azerbaijan border. Our efforts to reach the wreckage are continuing in coordination with the local authorities. God willing, we will overcome this accident with the least possible loss. May our Lord have mercy on our martyrs. Let us, with our prayers, be by their side, God willing.
Koordineli biçimde çalışmalarımız devam ediyor.
Azerbaijan also expressed condolences, sharing in Turkey's grief. In a message to President Erdogan, Azerbaijan extended heartfelt sympathies to the families of the deceased, the people of Turkey, and the Turkish government. Prime Minister Ali Asadov, in a conversation with his Georgian counterpart, affirmed that Azerbaijan is ready to provide all necessary assistance, including dispatching search and rescue teams and relevant personnel from the Ministry of Emergency Situations to the site. Turkish Vice President Cevdet Yilmaz also spoke by phone with Azerbaijani Prime Minister Ali Asadov about the situation. Yilmaz said Asadov conveyed Azerbaijan's condolences and solidarity, stressing that the country is closely following developments.
And we're coming to you from the closest accessible point near the crash site along Georgia's Azerbaijan border. Our correspondent has more.
We are reporting from the nearest point that the public can reach to the crash site here in Georgia's Signagi municipality. Just beyond this checkpoint, investigators and rescue teams are working, and access remains strictly restricted because the aircraft was military. Turkish rescue specialists have already joined the Georgian team. Forensic experts are already on the ground, and due to the extreme terrain, rescuers are using quad bikes and specially trained dogs. The area is high in the mountains and difficult to approach even in daylight, and the teams continued working without interruption through the night. The aircraft that crashed was a Turkish C-130E Hercules military transport plane. According to flight data, it took off from Ganja Airport in Azerbaijan at 14:19 and disappeared from civilian radars only a few minutes later. A News has received exclusive information confirming that the aircraft was transporting Turkish Air Force personnel responsible for servicing the F-16 jets that took part in the Victory Day parade in Baku on November 8, as well as spare mechanical parts for those aircraft. Right now, investigators are focused on two possible causes: a technical malfunction or structural failure, or human error, including unsecured cargo on board. However, experts say it is still too early for conclusions. The investigation depends heavily on the recovery of the plane's black box, which will show both cockpit communication and technical data. Once that device is analyzed, specialists will be able to determine what happened in those final minutes. Nini Nikolaishvili, Signagi, A News.
Now, France has announced new steps to support the creation of a future Palestinian state. President Emmanuel Macron said Paris will help the Palestinian Authority draft a constitution and will contribute 100 million euros in humanitarian aid to Gaza next year. The move follows France's recognition of a Palestinian state in September and reflects growing frustration with Israel's stance on peace talks. He made the announcement after talks with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas at the Élysée Palace on Tuesday.
Vous pouvez, Monsieur le Président, compter sur la France.
Mr. President, you can count on France to continue moving forward along the path we have forged together, to continue advancing according to the 20-point plan proposed by the United States, which paves the way for peace and the establishment of a Palestinian state. It is for this purpose that we have today jointly decided to establish a joint committee for the consolidation of the State of Palestine. This committee will be responsible for working on all legal aspects, constitutional, institutional, and organizational. It will contribute to the work of developing a new constitution, a draft of which President Abbas has presented to me, and will aim to finalize all the conditions for such a state of Palestine.
Staying on Gaza's peace plan, the US military is exploring the possibility of building a temporary base near the Gaza Strip, capable of housing 10,000 personnel. The move is part of plans for an international stabilization force to monitor the fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hamas signed last month. A Navy request for information sent to contractors outlines a self-sustaining base, including office space, meals, medical facilities, power, water, and full security for a year. Israel's military says it is coordinating with the US, but has no concrete details yet. The request for contractors mirrors a previous $1.26 billion project to build a 5,000-bed tent camp at the Army base in Texas.
Now, Venezuela is strengthening its national defense amid rising tensions with the United States. President Nicolas Maduro has signed a new law creating integral defense commands to unify civilian and military forces across the country. This move comes alongside nationwide military exercises, signaling Venezuela's readiness to defend its sovereignty.
Queremos paz, tendremos.
Venezuela is immediately activating its so-called integral defense commands designed to unify civilian and military forces across the country. It's after President Nicolas Maduro signed a new national defense law on Tuesday. Maduro said the law establishes a network of state and military bodies to respond to threats.
Todos los comandos de defensa integral.
By signing, the order must be activated for the integral defense commands to be established, structured, and put to work to be prepared. If we, as a republic, as a people, must go to armed struggle to defend this sacred heritage of the liberators, we must be ready to win, to triumph through the path of patriotism and courage. So I proceed to sign and execute the law for the creation of National Integral Defense Commands, signed, approved and ratified today, Tuesday, November 11th, 2025.
De los comandos de defensa integral a nivel nacional. Firmada, aprobada.
The law, approved by Venezuela's National Assembly in an historic vote, received support from both the President and Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino Lopez. Assembly President Jorge Rodriguez said it would reshape the country's military doctrine.
The honourable deputies who are in favour of approving the second discussion of the bill for the Integral Defence Command of the nation, in accordance with the provisions of Article 106 of the Internal Rules and Debate, please manifest it with the customary signal. Consequently, it is approved with a qualified majority.
On the same day, Venezuela's Bolivarian armed forces launched a nationwide military exercise, Plan Independencia 200, testing the real-time deployment of weapons and forces. The moves come amid ongoing tensions with the United States, which has carried out multiple strikes on vessels near the Venezuelan coast and in the eastern Pacific since September, killing dozens of people. The US claims the boats were transporting drugs, though critics have demanded evidence. Maduro has accused Donald Trump of seeking to topple his government, a claim the US president has downplayed.
Over to the world of technology now, and Google has unveiled its biggest investment in Germany. The tech giant is set to invest $6.4 billion to expand its cloud and artificial intelligence infrastructure by 2029. The plan was unveiled on Tuesday by Finance Minister Lars Kleinbeil and includes a new data center in Deichenbach and expansion of another in Hanoi, both near Frankfurt. The project will support roughly 9,000 jobs and boost Germany's role in Europe's tech and AI industry. The move will also boost the country's struggling economy.
You can't go absolutely anywhere on Google now without an AI. I'm sorry, I just had to interrupt.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
You know when you type something in Google and it gives an AI summary?
Yes.
Does that annoy you?
It not only annoys me, it frustrates because I don't actually know what it is, but also Meta does that with WhatsApp.
Yes, it's everywhere.
It is.
So this new investment, what do you think that's going to translate into?
Well, we don't know. What I did find out, however, Google has been doing a lot of these investments, especially along with tech and AI and a number of different things. But this one is the biggest for Germany within Europe. But India actually got 15 billion investment from Google. So it's quite interesting that they're investing not only in Europe, but also in India, also certain countries in Africa and a number of places. So it's quite interesting as to where they're spreading.
Well, it is the industry now, isn't it? It's a pioneering industry. I mean, I've got to be frank. I've only ever used ChatGPT. I find all the other ones, but once you find one, you don't change.
Yeah, and I think we know that AI is definitely here to stay. So it's just showing that more and more is coming.
Of course. Now, tensions rose at the United Nations Major Environmental Summit in Brazil as indigenous groups confronted security over access to the venue. Demonstrators at COP30 expressed frustration over threats to their territories and called for stronger inclusion in international climate decisions. Authorities managed to contain the situation after some injuries were reported.
Tense scenes unfolded at the COP30 Climate Summit in Brazil, where dozens of indigenous protesters forced their way into the conference venue and clashed with security guards. The confrontation happened on Tuesday in the Amazon city of Belém, where world leaders and delegates are meeting for this year's United Nations climate talks. Protesters shouted angrily as they demanded access to the UN compound, accusing authorities of ignoring indigenous rights. The groups say they're angered by ongoing development in the Amazon that threatens their land and way of life.
They are the government, this protest. It's a way of defending the space where it's being held at this moment. But for us, it's a moment of revolt, of indignation. It's a moment when we indigenous people feel the defeat of our territory in our skins. We don't eat money, we want our territory free. But the business of oil exploration, mineral exploration and logging continues.
Security guards pushed protesters back and used tables to block the entrance. One guard rushed away in a wheelchair, clutching his stomach. Another guard, bleeding from a cut above his eye, said he had been struck by a heavy drumstick thrown from the crowd. Authorities confiscated several batons before the protesters dispersed. The group had earlier joined hundreds of demonstrators marching toward the venue to demand stronger climate action and indigenous participation in decision-making.
Wow, those pictures are quite moving, aren't they? Especially coming out of COP30, where it's supposed to be all-inclusive, talking about the climate, what they can do to change things. And then you've got this indigenous group who are campaigning and protesting to say that the Amazon is being targeted for oil profits and gains, and they're being moved to one side.
It really is quite surprising. Of all the protests to be held at any conference, world event, I wouldn't expect COP to be up there, particularly as it's championing, trying to champion climate action. And we heard there from an indigenous man of Belém, Brazil, talking about how he didn't want money, he just wanted his territory back, and the deforestation being a very large issue in Brazil as well. Now we know Lula, the president, champions climate action as well and says they cannot be broken, but this, I'm still surprised seeing it. I really am. I don't know what they wanted to get out of the protest per se, but Yeah, quite shocking seeing the violence.
It is, and I think it just goes to show there's not just one story. There's a number of different factors that contribute to climate change for profit, for gain, mostly, and the different people that it impacts. And obviously, it's impacting the indigenous people of the Amazon in Brazil, especially.
Yeah, very interesting. We'll keep you up to date as we have our correspondent there as well.
Indeed. Now, next, in southern Lebanon, a once thriving ancient pine forest is struggling to survive as an invasive insect, and climate change devastates cone harvests. Farmers who long relied on the pines now face empty yields and fading livelihoods.
In the pine-covered hills of southern Lebanon, a quiet crisis is reshaping life in Beqassin, home to the Middle East's largest productive pine forest. Once a symbol of abundance, the forest is now struggling against a relentless pest and the mounting pressures of climate change. For generations, families like that of 62-year-old harvester Miled Hareb lived off the pine trade.
Regarding the pine cone, this one has black seeds inside, indicating a high percentage of empty fruit. Last year, about 75% to 80% of it was empty, but this year I expect more because it's all damaged.
The culprit, scientists say, is Leptoglossus occidentalis, a North American insect that arrived in Lebanon around 2015. It feeds on pine cones, leaving them hollow. Forest expert Dr. Nabil Namer said the insect has wiped out much of the forest's productivity.
We tried to consult with experts from Europe and with experts from neighboring countries, including Turkey, just to see the insect's behavior and see whether the same phenomena observed in Turkey were also appearing in Lebanon. There was almost a complete match in the phenomena, and we confirmed that this insect, which we saw in Lebanon in 2015, is one of the main causes of the decline in pine tree productivity in Lebanon.
The pest spread, worsened by drought and rising temperatures, has left trees too weak to defend themselves. In some cases, over 80% of the cones are empty. Syrian worker Nabil Assad, who has harvested cones for more than a decade, said the industry has nearly collapsed.
There used to be more than 200 to 250 of us working during this season, between tree workers and field workers. Now we are less, barely 20 to 30 people work, because the season has slowed down, there's no pine season, the cones aren't good, they are empty.
The economic fallout is deep. Pine nut prices have soared to nearly $100 a kilogram, turning a national delicacy into a luxury. Illegal logging and decades of mismanagement have further weakened Lebanon's forests. Efforts to save Beqassin's trees are underway. The Ministry of Agriculture and university researchers are training farmers to identify pests and report outbreaks. But experts warn that without long-term coordination and climate adaptation, Lebanon's ancient pines and the communities that depend on them may not survive.
Let's take a short break now. We'll return with an update on the stories making their way in the US and the UK.